When it comes to problems like numbers 5 and 6, there's actually kind of two ways you could approach it. So let's read it, and then I'll talk about the two ways that you could do these problems. So in number 5, it says if f of x is equal to 2x plus 3, so notice that's a linear function, is translated up 2 units, resulting in g of x. So they want you to translate it, which means you're going to kind of shift it up 2 units. They want you to label this new function as g of x, okay? And then it says, which of the following represents g of x? Well, they give you all the equations. So you're looking at what the equation would be of the new line, okay? So one way that you could do this is you could do it by graphing it, okay? And so if I did that, I would grab a piece of graph paper. I would graph the original line, which they label as f of x. So if I graph the original line, it hits the y-axis at 3. There's my y-intercept. And then you have to go with the slope. It's 2 over 1. So that means you go up 2 and right 1 to graph that line, and you just keep following that pattern. Then to go the other way, you do the opposite. So we'd go down 2 and left 1. And so that's the line of f of x. That's the original function. Okay, so we'll connect our dots here the best that I can. And then they want us to actually shift that line. And they tell us that we need to translate it or shift it up 2. So if I take that line and I move each of those dots up 2, so move that one up 2, move this one up 2, 1, 2, that one up 2. I'm just moving all of my dots up 2. So notice I'm going directly up from where that dot is. I actually have my new line. And so what I can do now, this was f of x, and then I'm going to label my new line as g of x, is I could just find the equation of this new line. So I'm going to actually make it dotted so I can definitely tell that these are kind of two different lines here. And then I'll label this one. So this one, the dotted line, would be g of x, okay? And so if I find the equation of that line, let's see, the y-intercept is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I write it, mx plus b, my lead keeps breaking. No. My y-intercept is 5. And then my slope, well, if I kind of pick 2 points on my line, I have to go up 2 and right 1. So rise over run. If I'm going up 2, that's my rise part. And then right 1 would be the bottom number. And so that's my slope. So my slope just ends up being 2 over 1 is just 2. So the equation of that line would be 2x plus 5. Okay, so that's how you do it by graphing. So we know that the answer would be C. Okay, now something else that we actually talked about today is how to kind of look at the equation and just deal with the equation. So if you wanted to just deal with the equation part of it, you could. Okay, so if they're telling you to shift it up 2, the up and down part we talked about is like an outside transformation. So if they're shifting it up 2, they're wanting you to take this equation and add 2 kind of to the outside of it. So what that's going to look like is you'll take your equation, my 2x plus 3, and you will add 2. So because everything's kind of being added there, I could just add 2 kind of to the outside of it. Notice I'm taking the equation and then I'm just adding 2 kind of afterwards. So if I do that, I will get that new function. So let's do that. So if I did that, well, I just have to combine my like terms, and so that will just come down, the 2x, and then 3 plus 2 ends up being 5. So that would be my new equation. And notice that's the same thing we got when we graphed it. So you could do it by graphing, or you could just look at the equation, okay? So what about number 6? Well, you can do this one both ways as well. So you can graph it, or you could do the equation. So if we graphed it, grab a piece of graph paper, you graph your line, So if I graphed this line, the y-intercept is 1, so I start at 1, and then my slope is -3, and it's like a -3 over 1. So from that dot, I would go down 3, and then right 1. -3 meant I had to go down 3. And then I'd keep following that pattern to graph this line. And then to go the other way, you go up 3 and left 1. Okay, and so I think we've got enough points now, so we'll connect our points to make our line. And then remember, you can always use a ruler or like the edge of a sheet of paper if you would like to have a better line. And so from here, now let's look at what it's telling us to do. So this one's written a little bit different. It's saying that it's replaced with g of x, which is equal to this. So let's talk about what that means. So we started relating it to kind of just how it's written in what's called function notation. And so one thing that we talked about is if it's inside the parentheses with the x, that's going to be a horizontal transformation. So horizontal is left and right. And so if we're subtracting 2, the thing you had to remember is if we actually shift this, it does the opposite of what we would think. So, you know, think left and right. We would think that it would go left 2 because -2 is typically left 2. So then the opposite of that would be we have to actually shift this line right 2. Okay, so I'm going to take each of my points in this graph and I'm going to shift it right 2. Okay, and then I'll just look at the new equation. So if I take each of these points, right 2, that would end up right there, that would end up there, so on and so forth. And notice I'm just shifting them directly to the right 2, and then I think I have another one up here that I can move, okay? And so this would be that new line. And now all you have to do is tell the equation of that line. So to write the equation, we usually write it in slope-intercept form, and if we look at our answer choices, we see that those are in slope-intercept form. So I have to find the y-intercept, so that's where it crosses the y-axis. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, so that's my y-intercept, and then we find the slope. So you pick 2 points on it and do the slope. So if I notice, it actually is the same slope as what it was before, so it'd be -3 over 1, or just -3. So that's the equation of my line. So now all I have to do is go down here, look at which answer choice matches it, and I'll have it, okay? Or you can do it with the equation. So I'm going to show you how to do it with the equation, okay? So since this is on the inside with the x, instead of just adding it kind of to the side of it like we did before, we have to actually put it in parentheses with the x. So when I take this equation, just like before, you kind of write the equation down, but I have to actually completely replace the x with this, okay? So when I rewrite it, oh, I don't know where that came from, sorry. When I rewrite it, instead of the x, I'm going to put what's supposed to go in place of it. So I'm going to put parentheses and I'm going to plug in that x minus 2, just like that. And then notice I have to write the rest of my equation. And so if you do that, then that'll transform it like you did in the graph, okay? So to simplify this, and this would be the new function after the transformation, you notice you have a -3 outside of parentheses, so you have to distribute your -3. So when I do that, -3 times x is -3x, and then -3 times -2 is +6. And then my +1 comes down, and then you just combine like terms. So the -3x comes down, and then 6 plus 1 is 7. And so notice either way you did it, you ended up with the same answer, okay? So you can do these by graphing them and then transforming the graph, or you can do it with the equation.